Check, check.
Here. Nice to see everyone again. That's for beginning and page.
I'm Tracy Sid with the phone thing. Let's see, maybe we'll do. One more minute. Bill coming?
I think you told me.
You what?
Count by vote. Yeah,
I reached out to him and told him that he was still participating in medicine if he wants to continue on this committee. Well, they did, waited and yeah, they
And the board has not made committees left, right?
not yet, they'll do it on the 24th. But I did tell him that he was welcome to continue if he wanted to come today and let everybody know he was so interested, serving as a public member.
Cool. All right.
Do you like Judy?
Huh?
Just checking to see if you like Julie too.
Favorites among the guys. So, all right. Okay, so we're gonna spin this up and call it to order and start as usual, pledge of allegiance.
Turn on your mics, folks.
Ready? Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Roll call. Clint Nelson here. Peter Johnson,
Here?
Peter Henson,
Here.
Bill Stewart. Chad Williams alternate. 7-4, instructions to allow public comment on agenda items.
No, Dawn's gonna shoot me. Okay. Please don't.
Anthony, is Craig here? He isn't here now. There's no public here. That's Amelia, right? Or is that?
If at any point anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment and join this meeting with their computer, they can click on the raise hand button located at the bottom of the screen. We will be alerted they would like to speak. When called upon, please unmute the microphone and ask the question or make comments in no more than 3 minutes. Those who have joined by dialing a number on their telephone will need to press *6 to unmute themselves and then *9 to alert us they would like to speak. A slight pause will also be offered at the conclusion of each agenda item discussion to allow public members an opportunity to make comments or ask questions. Okay. Item 5. Seating of alternates. We have a quorum. We have 3 out of 4. Chad, please stay. But No need to seat an alternate today. Item number 6, additions, deletions, and amendments to the agenda. I'll start with the staff. Tracy, Tom, anybody got any changes?
Nope.
Any committee members?
No.
Okay, done. DUN. Public comment relating to items not on the agenda. Do we have any public attendees? Nada. Any written communications, Dawn?
We did not receive any written.
Okey dokey pokey. Okay, item 8, approval of minutes. All of you received in your agenda packet the minutes that Dawn and her crew have prepared.
Made that revision. I took Julie's arrival time off of the minutes.
Okay,
I don't know.
One minute.
feeling a little sensitive today, are we?
Actually, it was my new nickname, 1 minute late Johnson.
Okay, are there any suggested changes or comments on the minutes? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
So move.
Julie moves, Pete seconds. We can do it by acclamation. All those approve, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, done. Item 9, general manager comment. Tom, that's you.
Yeah, I know that in the previous months, I talked about the drought situation or the water supply shortage situation. Well, times have changed a little bit. But I think it highlights pretty clearly for us, during the detachment proceedings, the water authorities would make a lot of hay at LAFCO saying, oh, Met's going to run out of water. Met's going to run out of water. Look at the state water project. It's out of water. And they were forecasting a La Nina year this year. But it turns out it's flipped to El Nino here as pretty clearly. And what we're seeing now over the last couple of weeks, and you look at the forecast for Northern California, it's going to be raining for the next week still. And now it's gotten to the point where it's in flood stage. But as we go through this process, we have to remember we have the Colorado River supplies that Met and the water authority is heavily dependent on, and then Met is less dependent on in the state water project. We're seeing snowpack levels that now are already reaching what the April 1st peak is, and there's more to come. And so it's likely we'll see a return of what we saw 4 or 5 years ago, 2017, when Lake Oroville overflowed and all that stuff happens. And it's symptomatic of how our climate has changed and our weather patterns are changing, and where we're getting drier dries and hotter hots. But it's more than likely that we won't see allocations this year. That's my prediction at this point. The Met board was waiting till April to make that decision because they want to see how this water year plays out, which was the right call. We should still be wise with our water. We're not going to be out of it yet. There's a significant groundwater deficit in California. We need more storage, as I think the flooding everywhere in the state, except for San Diego, thankfully, well, everywhere from Ventura north pretty much is being flooded out. I think in the long-term game, we need to get more water into storage when we have these winter wets, and there's a big push going up, and I'm likely to bring it up with the board. There's a consortium of water agencies around that want us to join and, contribute 10 or 15 grand, I think is what the buy-in is for a lobbying push in Sacramento to start moving those projects forward to where when we have these big wet winters, we need to move that water to storage as opposed to just flooding it all out to the ocean. People say, why can't we do that here in San Diego? We hear that all the time. Hey, why aren't we saving this water? There's just nowhere to put it. The volume of water it takes is enormous. And if you got a rain barrel in your house, it probably filled up the first night it rained, and then the rest of it, where you put it. If we were to say in San Diego, you wanted to store everything coming down San Diego River, you'd have to depopulate Mission Valley and build a big old dam out there, where dams could be built that have been built. We also don't have groundwater storage here, but we will still see over the next 2 weeks the cuts coming on the Colorado. The situation of the Colorado isn't something that one normal water year, even a wet water year, will cure, because the long-term average of deliveries of water available is 3 million acre feet less than the water being diverted. So it's a structural problem. The federal government is expected to step in unless the 7 basin states somehow miraculously come to a 2 to 4 million acre foot reduction on their own, which I don't expect to happen. So we should see by the end of the month, the federal government stepping in and using what we all like to call the federal hammer to say, all right, here's what's going to happen. How that impacts San Diego County, the water authority, we don't know. One of the discussions I've heard is that because San Diego pays so much for that Imperial Valley water, we pay $650 an acre foot, where the farmers only pay $20 an acre foot for the same water. they'll probably want to keep selling that water to San Diego. So it's not a secure supply because it's reliable. It's secure supply because we pay so much more that they'd rather cut the cheaper water, the less revenue water than that. But we'll see. But in the long run, if you look out 40 or 50 years, the writing's kind of on the wall for being totally dependent on imported water. And so our efforts to get our groundwater program going this year, we should expect direct potable reuse regs to come out. They're supposed to be 2023 to recover all of our wastewater for beneficial use. And it's an all the above strategy. But right now we're 100% dependent on weather vagaries that occur north of us and east of us. So, but I think it'll be good news. If nothing else, we won't see as draconia cuts that might have come. But my expectation is if we get a normal water year and restore reservoir levels, there'll still be drought messaging, but no mandatory cutbacks.
Comments or questions? Tom, just one? So that's what the signs that I see littered along Interstate 5. Why are we dumping water? Stop dumping water in the ocean. That's what they're referring to, right? Is the lack of storage to be able to
Yeah, some of that.
capture the water.
I mean, the other parts is that some people see rivers as something that should be consumed in its entirety. I mean, you can use the Colorado River Delta as an example of what happens when you take the entire Colorado River. You have a ecological problem. We need to balance the needs of the environment, which is protected in our state constitution, and our need for use. I think the number one way to get there is to limit how much water is used for non-beneficial uses to the people and animals in the state of California, i.e. the massive amount, not our farmers, but farmers also, they're exporting almonds and alfalfa to China and Middle East and places like that, who use about a third of the river in the Colorado system. And so it's, we got to start there, but we will see hopefully movement toward at least the sites and Temperate Flats reservoirs. There's also some new geological work to be done that found what they call paleo valleys in the Central Valley that were old river channels that have been filled in, but with more coarse substrates so that you can put water more effectively in those and a faster way to recharge those. But you still can't take the floodwaters we have now and get them in there. You have to hold that somewhere, and then it's called put capacity. You can pump water out a lot faster than you can put water in a groundwater basin. And some places have sunk so much that it's all compressed now anyway, so it's never going to go back in there the way it was. But hopefully saner minds will win the day, but it all comes down to, the money. You follow the money, and the people who are making a ton of money on this, the billionaires who run the almond and pistachio and those sorts of industries have a lot of sway. So
Thank you, Tom. That was uplifting.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
Item number 10, finance manager comments. Tracy,
I don't have any comments.
none?
What?
She'll have plenty to say.
Item number 11, committee member comments. Julie, you got anything? P?
Nope.
I do. And this is beating the dead horse. And I have been thinking, that's dangerous, Will Robinson, about the situation we had with that variance previously. And so I'm just going to ask a question, which we may not be able to answer today, and that is fine. There was some discussion about alternatives to dealing with the variance, and one of the items was that, is there a way that, and I didn't hear an answer to it, is there a way that the district under its existing authorities could offer, for example, the posting of a bond so that if the customer was allowed to have being billed for a smaller meter, and after 12 months, the usage was too high, and therefore the capacity fee needed to be augmented, that the bond could be triggered to do that. And I looked briefly at the administrative code, but I'm no expert on it. And it appeared to me that it said that when we grant the variance that we can simply place conditions,
Right.
but it did not spell out conditions you may or may not. And so I was wondering if the imposition of a bond to try and provide a little relief for, or a little equity for new home builders. I know the historic problem, but on new, if that is an option to us or not.
It's definitely an option under any kind of agreement like that. We can establish whatever conditions we want, just like the downsize agreements has conditions. And every now and then when we have to exercise those conditions, people are like, what do you mean you're gonna put me back up? We're like, well, here's what you signed. Here's what it said. And this is the deal. So we can certainly do that. One of the complications goes, all right, well, if we have a bond, how long does that bond have to stay in place? Is it just as long as you own the home, or what happens when you sell the home? Or is this bond something that is for 12 months or 18 months or 24 months? Because one of the challenges is that people's uses change. Now, we never know what people are going to do in the future. And one of the things that Andrea and Tracy are working on that we're getting closer to, we're not going to be talking about today particularly,
Fix the oxymoron.
some way to
deal.
bundle people's fixed charges more in line with their usage. Because one thing is to lose the capacity fee, but the other thing is we have people who use enormous amounts of water who pay the same monthly fee, fixed fee, which is the largest component of a lot of people's bills, not these, the big users it isn't, but the small users it is. They're paying the same as somebody who uses 5 units and they're using 250 units a month. Andrew, how many water agencies have as weird of water usage patterns as we do? I mean, I think we're about as extreme as you get. So, right. And so we got to find a different way to do it. We've tried a couple different ways, and we have to balance what's will work mathematically and what will work legally.
Right.
And those are the problem. The law ties our hands. But yes, those are definitely things that I've had some conversation with Alfred. I haven't pinged him since the beginning of the year here, but we're working toward that. I think it's a two-pronged thing. Is one is to provide immediate relief sort of thing, but the other is to have a structure that ties people, that gets them where we need them to be in the long term as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And like I said, I did not expect that it would be reopened or any of that. I just wanted to, what really got me thinking about it was the fact that that there were some comments that the customer, the ratepayer, had not provided approved plans for grading or for house or whatever. And I got to thinking, well, let's see, who's he dealing with? He's dealing with the County of San Diego. And then I got to thinking, well, what are our relations like when we have projects that we need cooperation and flexibility from the County of San Diego? Maybe we have a ratepayer that's relatively speaking a pretty straightforward person, but it didn't fit the cookie cutter that the county needs. So they just wave you off the flight deck. I mean, we've had that happen a couple of times, Chad, have we not?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we got any plans from that. Not necessarily. I don't think we asked for a plan. We said, do you have any plans? How many
So-
bedrooms? How many bathrooms? You know,
So that's what got me thinking as I was thinking, maybe
nothing.
it's the county that's causing that person to have a problem and that,
yeah,
I don't know.
There are certain people who undertake these sorts of projects who aren't familiar with the processes
Right.
involved, and they're trying to sew up certain items when they're not ripe. for
Yep.
sewing.
yeah,
And
looks like all work over there is stopped, by the way. So there we go. Thank you. Item 12, wastewater financial plan and preliminary cost of service.
well, we're graced today to have Andrea here in person, in real life, first time in a while, right? I don't know. Have you been here IRL and since the pandemic started? I don't know.
I've been here once. since
Oh.
then.
To present to the committee? Or just to see Tracy?
No, we.
Okay,
presented.
sorry, I forget. I know it's been a while. They've been working real hard on the wastewater side of the house here, looking at the stuff but before she gets going, and I know it's been mentioned in here. One of the things that came out of this, when we're looking at the numbers, we're like, man, why are we so upside down? They're looking at it, and they started looking at our rates. And as it turned out, in the last 6 months or year of Vanessa's tenure here, the board did a cost of service study 5 years ago and looked at the wastewater charges and said, all right, and approved an escalation of the charges over time. Well, I don't know what happened there, but those never got implemented. And so our rates never changed. I was unaware of this, but it's my fault. I should have followed up on it. I just assumed once the board would do it, they get implemented. So the hole we're seeing is, we're like, hey, what is going on here? And when they did, wait a minute, these
So
rates
part
should
of our own making, huh?
part of our own making. And so we have a bigger gap. I mean, right now, our rates are much lower than competitor rates around town. And mainly because we haven't escalated them the way that we had looked at and had done. And that's a little embarrassing and it ends up, it's my fault. I should have followed up and said, hey, but I generally, when this happens, I don't, all right, here it is, we go implement, and I failed to follow up. So, and then Tracy got hired after that was all done, and I thought it was already done. It wasn't like, hey, Tracy, first thing you gotta do is implement these rates, because
Yeah, we haven't really looked at wastewater. And then when Andrew and I started looking at it, I found the old study and nearly had a heart attack. Looked at it.
So we're 3 years behind. Am I correct to hear?
2018.
so
5
we're
years.
5 years
5 years.
behind?
This will be the 5th year.
It was-
And I'm sorry, but I'm a new member of this committee. I don't know you. Could you tell us a
Oh,
little
sorry.
bit?
I'm Andrea Bowling. I'm with IB Consulting. We worked with Tracy and Tom in the district for several years now, but only on the water side. So this is our
Okay.
first time having a go at your wastewater rate.
Okay, thank you.
Andrea, for a number of years, worked for Raftellus, and then broke off and formed her own fledgling company, which is thriving now. And we decided to cut the middleman out and hire Rebecca.
And it's been great. Mm.
If you're going to cover it, then just tell me, but I'm just idly curious. Have we looked to see where we would be financially had we implemented the rates? Would we be clean and green and good to go?
We would be certainly in better shape.
Well, I know better shape,
I don't
but
want to steal any more thunder. I just wanted to come out, and if there's gonna be a mea culpa, I want to take it.
Well, I was just wondering about the efficacy of that rate increase, our analysis. Would it have been good for us?
Oh,
Better than,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
better, I know better, but I mean, would it have achieved the desired objective?
I believe it would have,
Okay,
but I don't want to put any words in their mouth.
all right.
Nope. Tom just covered my first half of my slide here. So thank you. That was awesome. Just to summarize though, again, just where did we come from and where are we headed? Again, your last study was in 2018. The study adopted a 5-year worth of rate. So fiscal year 2018 through 2022. Okay. Each of those had a 7.5% annual increase. Give you an idea. Obviously, March 1st was when those first year rates went into effect. Calendar year 2018 was the transition. Here we are, January 2019. The scheduled rate increases for that second year did not go into effect. Again, just to maybe evaluate on it a little bit more, your billing system should never automatically update it. That's something that has to be initiated. So it unfortunately fell through the cracks. Okay. And again, when you do annual updates, almost every time you want to go forward and look, you want to see, okay, how did we perform? Are we better than we anticipated? Are we worse off? Do we need to go up to the full notice rate? So again, it can't really be an automatic process. We started working again with Tracy when we started looking at reserves. We were engaged in the fall of this last year. Right now we're up to January. We're doing our financial plan workshop. So with that in mind, if you guys have questions, if you guys have comments, I'm really looking for your feedback to help us direct where we want to go. Okay. We are aiming for proposed new rates of July 1st of 2023 for your fiscal year 2024 rates. This is what the rates would have looked like. This is what was noticed and adopted back in 2018. You can see on March 1st, on that first column, those are the rates that are in effect today. Okay. So if you're looking at the $55.07, that's an EDU charge, it's per month. So essentially, if you're a single family home, you only have one residence on the property, normal sized home, you would get charged the $55.07 per month. Okay. The rate increases that didn't happen would be cumulative 34% increase from 2018. Okay. But again, they weren't implemented. So we're back here at the $55.07 per EDU. So the first thing we need to do is we need to look at your financial plan and the health of utility. Big picture, Flint, you're probably used to this. I think you maybe seen this slide before, but we want to look at it big picture. What all is included in our financial planning? You know, what do we think of when we think of the utility health? The first thing we look at is expense projections. We want to go budget line item by line item, and we escalate them based off of various assumptions. And I'll show those in the next slide. Okay, and that's where we have some flexibility. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't tell you exactly what it's going to be. This year was really high in inflation. We didn't see that coming. So that's for everybody. The next thing we want to look at is flow demands. Is there any big system changes? We really haven't seen any drastic changes for you guys in terms of wastewater. We look at account growth. We look at, hey, did you guys have some big commercial entity come in that's like a brewery or something? So we want to make sure that we're taking all of that into play for our financial planning. We also look at revenue projections. Unfortunately, you guys don't have a lot more than just freight revenues. You got a tiny little bit of property tax. I mean, that's really it. There's not a lot else there to work with. The biggest piece of a financial plan is always the capital spending. You guys do send your flows to Oceanside to be treated, so you don't have a treatment plant, but that doesn't mean you don't have capital, and quite a bit of it, okay? That all that collection system, the lift stations, I'm sure there's been some conversations on those that all cost a lot of money and they need to be repaired and replaced and maintained, okay? And then the final piece of the picture is your reserve funding. And that's really to account for any unforeseen risks, make sure we can continue our operating. So the key assumptions we used so far in the financial plan, again, we're open to feedback. Right now, we're going to assume 0% growth. I think that's the most conservative approach and the most appropriate given the uncertainty in the climate. Okay, conversely, if we were to assume some growth, then that means that we need it to occur to meet our revenue needs, right? So if we develop rates assuming growth, if it doesn't happen, then you guys are going to be short and we don't want to put you in that situation. Yeah, go ahead.
The reserve interest rate is how much we expect to collect in interest on our reserve. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, got it. That number makes sense. Thank you.
And I feel like it's pretty conservative. We can adjust it if need be. I don't think it's going to be very impactful because of where we're at right now. I wasn't saying that, but I'm saying that. Yeah.
We could do puts and calls and play some games and see if we can get that rate up, but that. Right.
Cost benefit here, guys. So the cost escalations right now, we're assuming, and this is year over year, salary is 5%, benefits 3%. I feel like this is still pretty conservative. I'm not concerned by those numbers at all. Most recently, a couple of our agencies, especially here in Southern California, have found that they're having a harder time attracting new people and personnel into some of those retirement positions. So they're having to pay more to bring them in. So like I said, I don't know that I'd feel comfortable going much below 5% for your salary. I don't know how much turnover you guys have coming up, but just keep that in mind that it's getting harder and harder to attract that personnel. Tom's like, I'm not on my way out the door. Capital construction, we use ENR index for our figures. But right now, just because of the state of where we're at, we assumed a 7% for both fiscal year 24 and 25. And that's basically where we were at the last time I looked at the current inflationary factor.
7% of what?
7% escalation. So ENR is engineering news. So it's tied to construction costs, like your pipes and your concrete. And so this would only apply for if you have capital outlay type cost, or if we were assuming capital projects, that's what we would escalate it by. Okay. You have feedback on that, Flint? You're thinking about it. I can see it. The wheels are turning.
No, I think that, well, they are turning, they're turning private right now.
So we kept it high for 2 years and then we brought it back down. And the 3.8% that you see there is just based off of a 5-year average. We can expand that if you want, 5, 10, 15 years. But I think, like I said, we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know how long it's going to be high for. Okay. General, those are just your, miscellaneous costs. We're doing the same kind of thing, but for CPI, Consumer Price Index from San Diego. And again, we dropped it back down in 2020, fiscal year 2026.
I think that's one of the things that hit us last time, because our water model, we were going off the previous 10-year of very low inflation. We went, woo.
And it was probably like 2.86 or something, right?
Yeah, and it went up to 8%.
Mhm.
Wow, because everything went up, and so we ran into some challenges there. So I think for planning purposes, there will be a return to normal someday, but when is that? So we just want to go conservative.
And our concern is we don't want to obviously be too high and increase those rates even more than they need to be, but we also don't want to come up short. So it's definitely a balancing game. And a guessing game. Energy costs are 5%. I'm still a little bit unsure on that one. My utility bill has gone up so much this last year,
Yes.
much more than the 5%. So, but again, you know, we have the budget in for this year, so that should already account for some of the increased cost. Tracy, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. So there should be a little bit there already, and this is just going beyond that. So fiscal year 2024 and beyond. So give it some thought. Treatment Oceanside, that's 6%. I don't recall, or I didn't read it in the report, but this is a cost that is completely outside of your guys' control. I would assume that you can apply the pass-through mechanism. So if you don't do that, you should probably notice it. Obviously, talk to your legal counsel about that, but that would help mitigate that risk. So if we assume 6% and it actually goes up by 8%, you are allowed to pass that through to your customers if you guys decide to do so. So it's just a little safety bucket there. And again, I'm just pointing out that accounts for about 35% of your guys' operating costs, or just to get your flows treated. Okay, so that's the assumptions that go into what you're now seeing. So what you're seeing is the wastewater only financial position. This is just operating. So the black solid line is your revenues, and you can see how we're holding them constant. This is at that $55 rate. The dotted red trend line is your expense projections through the financial plan period. And then the net cash flow would be the bars that you're seeing at the bottom. So all of this is saying is that your operating costs currently are outpacing your revenues. And right now in 2023, we're projecting a budgeted deficit of about $1.1 million. Okay. This is just operating. This doesn't include capital. This is just your operating expenses. So if we were to factor in your capital, this is your budgeted capital plan. Not saying that's what we're necessarily going to do, but this is what was planned.
Well, that first column we
Right. So we kept it in there. That's that Thoroughbred Lane lift station pipeline repair. I believe, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but it's wrapping up. A vast majority of that was paid for through the CFD funds. And I had a note there that 2.5 million of it would come in fiscal year 2024, but we just accounted for all the costs and the revenues to offset it in 2023, which is right before where our rates are going to go into effect.
So if I'm reading this
Yeah.
correctly, what I'm seeing is that in the very, very short term, we are okay on that because we have the CFD funding. But as soon as that goes away and there are no other development projects that we can harvest money from on the horizon, that's where we start getting uglier and uglier, right?
We have to
Yeah.
pay through it through reserves, which is the very next chart. So
Yeah, so the CFD,
Plus we
we
started-
we
plus-
didn't push the go button on that until the CFD
Right.
funding was secured.
Right.
But yeah, unless we're assuming no new development money. This is,
Well, and we started off on the operating side, $1 million in the hole, and that hole keeps getting bigger, deeper because of the
'Cause
situation.
we didn't
Yeah.
do what we should have
Right,
done.
right.
So it was,
Okay,
we've been noticing this year, it's like, man, why do we keep running down? What's going on here? And then it's like, oh, damn.
There
But
were-
yeah, I
there
think
were
that
so
one of
many
the,
years with big surpluses in wastewater. I
Yeah.
think, was it, while you were here that we had to refund people?
no, they cut the rates and I want to, Pete, you were here, they cut it like 2012. I think I was told that the sewer rates got cut significantly a couple years prior to my coming on board. They were higher, that we had too much reserves in wastewater at one point. That's the story I was told when I first started here, but that happened before I got here. So that's ancient history at this point. What
Mhm.
we're trying to do is to forecast conservatively on these. There's no new development money coming in. The thing about the wastewater system is the main bulk of it, the from Horse Ranch Creek all the way down 76, the main collector and conveyance system now with the Thoroughbred will all be new within the last, less than 10 years old. And so our lift stations and our main conveyance systems are good. And so some of the other capital projects were really, dealing with some of the ancillary stuff that isn't as high a priority as making capacity for all the new homes. So having a pause on capital isn't going to be an operational challenge. Obviously, it can't go on forever, but hopefully new development will come in at some point when this current economic malaise wraps up, and we'll see some additional influx of cap fee money that will help, keep things going.
I'm gonna go through this one really kind of quickly. This would be your reserves after funding capital, right? So all this is essentially saying is that if you don't do anything, which of course we're gonna do something, but if we didn't do anything, your reserves would be fully depleted this year and your capital projects would have to be deferred. Okay,
And no new development during that period.
Right.
That's-
Yeah. so this is like that existing
You have no money coming into the reserves and you're spending out of the reserves.
because of the deficit.
And unfortunately, we can't print money,
Darn it.
unlike the federal government.
Darn
Right,
it, those
Yeah.
guys get it. What a
right.
great crack.
So what goes into those reserves? I did want to talk about that just a little bit. So for wastewater, it's a little bit different than water. We only have two reserve balances or funds, if you will, operating and capital. And it's a factor of, it should be very consistent, stable revenues. Because most often wastewater, you charge a flat rate or a fixed charge per month. So it's set very consistent. It doesn't fluctuate like water when your water changes and usage patterns change. Very, I call it stable revenue. So because of that, we can have a lower operating reserve, right? So right now in fiscal year 2023, we have a beginning balance in the operating of 720K. So we're not completely out of money. Capital, we have 634K. Okay, so between the two reserves, you're at just a little over $1 million, right? $1.2 million or something, 3. Okay, so most
Keep
often,
in mind, though, that
Yeah.
we brought in $8 million right after the first of this year.
right, okay, right.
Yeah.
That's that CFP
Yeah.
funding, right? Yeah. So 60 days to 90 days, I'm comfortable with that, given the stability of the revenue, okay? Typically, we'd recommend between 3 and 6 months. So you're at the lower end of that, but it's like I said, I'm okay with it. Capital R&R, your guys' minimum right now, the absolute minimum that you would want to be is 1 year, your 5-year average CIP. So that's forward looking. So that's really good that you guys are looking forward as opposed to in the past.
We don't want to look back because we're big swallowing a big.
Right.
big-
Your target would be 2 years of your average CIP. I think for the situation you guys are currently in, I would even say, hey, you know what, your minimum is really depreciation. You kind of want to be at least targeting that just for health and safety. You know, depreciation, if you only fund depreciation, you won't be able to replace your assets. But as Tom said, you guys have already replaced quite a bit of them. So you have a lot of new assets. This is just the dollar amounts related to those targets. And this is looking into fiscal year 2024. So that's this upcoming year. Okay. That just gives you a sense of right now we're below where those minimum requirements are. Okay.
Andrea,
Yes.
I'm following your logic totally. But I have a question about the data.
Okay.
I'm looking at attachment B in the financial report where it gives us an indication of the wastewater capital projects or the program that goes out into the end of 27. And what I see is very little on the, well, there's the big project, obviously, but what I see is when we finish lift station, thoroughbred,
Okay.
all of that, I see a couple of years of virtually no expenses and then a big bomb for the next 2 years after that. So when we look at the average, what are we averaging a big year, 2 no years and two pretty good size years? Is that what we're averaging? Because at this point, the average number becomes kind of a meaningless number, is what I'm saying.
That's
It-
why we're talking about just doing our, the target we're looking for is just the annual depreciation. So it's just under
Right.
$1 million. Once the developments come back up, then we would start funding more capital projects with wastewater. Right now, they're saying we've replaced, the main infrastructure line, so we don't necessarily need to do all these other projects. Right now, they could be pushed out a little bit until the developments start back up and we can fund them with that. She's going to get into 2 different scenarios with that and what our options are in the next few slides.
Okay. Yeah, it's just that the thing is so unbalanced.
Right.
I mean, we
Yeah.
get
Right.
way up here and then nothing and then
Yeah,
over
we
here
had
and
just, with the capital plan for wastewater, we just pushed them out a bit, knowing that after the lift station 1, that we'd be pretty low on funds and that we were going
Right.
to be doing this study and looking at our options.
so if I'm hearing you correctly, it could even be that the stuff, the big wads, the 3.5 and the 4.4 million that we're looking in the 2 out year, that could even be pushed out
That
further,
might
more
be the
likely.
plan, yeah.
And that those could likely be lean years as well on the capital side. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're looking. at.
Thank you. Thank you. That
If
helps.
some new developments come in with big piles of cash, then we'll say, hey, okay, cool.
Okay.
There. But again, like we talked about on the water side, we're not putting any forecasted development money in this stuff because
Right.
don't want to get burned.
Unless it's in the
Again.
bank.
Summarize the review of the financial position, the current financial position. Again, we've used a lot of the reserves. Part of this, we were really focused on water. As you're trying to detach from San Diego County Water Authority, now we're shifting our focus. We gotta do both. Even when we, I think, did a rate study, Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last one, we were healthy enough that we were thinking of doing a $5 million loan from wastewater. So that tells you how quickly it can get eaten up without adjustment. Also, we've seen recently many agencies held off on their rate increases during the past couple of years due to COVID. And they're going back right now and they're going ahead and implementing the rates that they previously adopted. Okay, so that's happening quite often right now.
We were just ahead of the curve.
So you guys are a little bit longer than the COVID period. The operating deficit for fiscal year 2013, like I said, was budgeted around 1.1 million. This is getting to your question earlier, Flint. If the notice rates had been implemented, they would have generated almost 1.1 million extra revenue in this year.
So we
If
would
they
have
were
been
there for a whole
balanced.
year,
We'd have
you
been
would have been
balanced.
pretty close.
So we're pretty close to where.
So now we need to think about, okay, what are we gonna do for the proposed financial plan? What are we gonna do moving forward? That's just status quo right now today. What are we gonna do to get to our rates? So from my perspective, I think our proposed financial plan objective should be obviously to eliminate the deficit in operating. That's number one top priority. We gotta do that immediately. Fund operating reserve and then build up funding for the capital reserve. We're not going to do it all in one day. We're not going to do it all in 1 year, but we're going to build up for that capital. How are we going to achieve this? Again, we're going to have to adjust rates to cover the deficit. I'm assuming one of our only options at this point, I think, would be to cut the costs. And the only way that I see to do that is to defer. The only safe and fiscally responsible way, I would say, would be to go ahead and defer that capital if it's not critical. And it, like I said, every conversation I've had with Tracy and Tom, they're not critical at this point. So
Robert, any qualms from operations on those?
I'm sorry.
Good answer.
It's just the delay. We're just bumping it out a little bit.
We can never predict
Well,
Sure.
and
what's gonna fail us down the road, but invested in that outfall. If that,
Those are the things, if they go south on you, you have big problems. Little stuff, you have little.
yeah, but you notice Robert's got that
Yeah.
operations circumspect answer to that. Nah, they got a list of things they want over there, but
Oh,
they-
There's a couple of small lift stations that could use some TLC.
Yeah.
But as small lift stations, they're manageable if things get a little weird out there. The big stuff is the stuff you keep you up at night.
Are we prioritizing what we will start to implement and stabilize? So there is a team effort on what are the parties? Okay.
And that is one of my recommendations a little bit later. So point 3 was issue debt if possible. That's only if you were keeping that capital plan in there and you were trying to achieve it. Doesn't sound like it's really super necessary at this point. And might be hard to issue that debt, to be
Yeah.
honest,
say, what would our,
because you
Devin-
have to,
what would we
be-
be guaranteeing it with?
yeah, you have to
You
not
do
have
an
operating
asset
deficit.
sale.
And so we basically be pricing it like junk bonds almost just because of the,
Yeah, it
revenue.
isn't the best, but I think that the likelihood of development getting back up and running in 2 or 3 years is much higher than.
Yep,
these other things.
yep.
And then I don't really have any other options, but I can open it up to you guys. Again, you guys don't have a lot of other revenue sources.
Lotto is gonna be $1 billion. right?
If everybody
nice.
pulled together.
Put a huge short on the housing market, see what happens.
You had done.
So we've come up with 2 scenarios. that I want to walk through. The first one, as I've already mentioned, just deferring capital, right? That's our first step. If we defer all unnecessary or emergency type capital during the planning period, it will give us a little bit of a break so that we can catch up on the operating side. I'm not going to even say that that's going to mitigate our rate increases because it's not. It's just going to help us get back on the right footing. Okay. So what you're seeing in this table, when I say original CIP, I really mean budgeted. So that should be pretty close to that plan you were talking about, Flint. It's just escalated in those out years by that construction cost index. Correct. For 24 and 25. Well, I guess just 25 because there's no 24. A recommended minimum, if we were going to do a rate study and you guys were maybe not doing so great, but we still wanted to be fiscally responsible, we would recommend you just do depreciation. So I'm just giving you a target of what that would look like. And again, that's escalated. But for this study period, we're recommending that we just defer during the planning period. Don't do any CIP unless we come back and say, nope, there's some critical CIP projects that need to be completed. Okay.
Did Tracy tell you you're gonna get put on the spot today?
We've actually, so.
Oh, good. So the weeping is over, right?
Yeah. The gnashing of teeth.
I have a question. I know that there's been a pursuit of applying for multiple grants. So do we have a status on any successes with them for
Not
funds?
That we can report at this point.
Okay,
The main grants you see, sorry, the main grants you'll see on wastewater is if you're gonna be recycling. That's the big hot thing that you want. Getting grants to replace an old pipe or a lift station is a tall order.
okay.
Because there's a sexy project box you have to be able to check. And it doesn't meet the criteria.
All right, thank you.
And coming back to that, right now, when we're deferring the CIP, what I'm showing you in the table below, we're just trying to get back to an operating where we're just fully funding operating.
Okay.
Okay. So what you see in the following table, it says operating minimum 5 years. What I mean by that is just to get up so that we don't completely run out of reserves and have to stop what we're doing. In 2024, just to meet your minimum in year 5, not in year 1, but in year 5, we need a 50% adjustment in 2024. Okay, and I know it's very heavy lift. Stay with me. Then to get to year 5, where we're just meeting the operating minimum, and this isn't even capital, it's just operating, you need 4.5 adjustments thereafter each year. Okay, if you want to meet your operating and capital minimum by year 5, you're going to need 7.5 adjustments instead of that 4.5. And then what I would recommend as your rate consultant is that you really want to be at that target. And here's why, because you guys aren't funding capital. So I want you to get up to the target so that when we start introducing that capital again, you have some funds there to start building that up. Otherwise, you're going to get to the end of your 5-year period and all of a sudden you're going to need big adjustments again. And we don't want to do that to you guys, right? We want to try and take a measured approach. So that's scenario 1.
Andrea,
Yes,
I
I'll show you a picture.
got it. I got it.
Okay.
I know it may not have been in your scope of work, but perhaps you have looked at it. After 2028, assuming that we have achieved our objective, any sense as to what those percent increases look like? Because they're clearly not going to march on at 9.5% annually after that.
I would,
I think
What
it also
I'm-
depends
and
on
what I'm-
PNR and things like that.
And what I'm,
and unfortunately your capital, right? So if we
Right.
were to drop in your capital, we could see that. Without the capital, I have no way of knowing where that's going to be, but let me skip past this slide. We'll come back to it.
I'm just kind of wondering, I guess I'm thinking about the politics of it a little bit. I'm kind of wondering how happy the board is going to be at 50%, followed by 5s and 7s and 9s after that, with sort of no hope in sight. And I'm guessing you might get some questions from the board. Well, what would happen if the 50% was lower? and we stretch this puppy out beyond what you're recommending because of political considerations. And so I just would suggest, if you haven't already figured
It's
it
not
out,
an election
you look-
year. What?
yeah, it's always an election year on rates. Just,
I
just,
absolutely hear what you're saying, and we can definitely run a scenario where we introduce that capital in those out years or do a measured approach for that capital in those out years, so I can. Again, I would keep it in, and again, that's what we're gonna have. But getting rid of that 50%, problem with trying to spread that out.
It
is that
compounds.
don't- Not just that it compounds, it's that where is that money coming from? That's what I'm gonna show you in just a minute. We can Go to scenario
well,
2.
Tracy's good at inventing money. She does it for us all the time.
But don't do that 50% now. You're gonna use up all your reserve and then there's literally a deficit in your reserves. So that money has to come from somewhere and I'm asking, where is it
I
gonna come
appreciate
from?
that. And I don't know what the answer is. I just was suggesting that you have a few stretch out scenarios in your pocket in the event the board is just looking at 50% and going, oh,
And the only way I can see
Better
something,
than the gas
yeah.
bill for
Yeah.
SDG went up 100%.
And Andrew, I have a question. Does the water district have a mandatory minimum reserve percentage that they must maintain?
Not by law, by policy, internal policy. There's no state law that says you must have this. But we have,
These are-
we set in our financial policies that this committee looks at periodically. and we
Okay.
Set them in those.
that's what those are.
Okay.
But again, that's your guys' own policy.
Okay.
Some agencies have different policies. That they-
Mhm.
I don't know what he looks at. And it's-
Actually, we're doing theirs right now. I should know that off the top of my head and I don't. But they are a much bigger agency and they have a lot more to work with too. So a lot more customers to spread it. You can't compare them. They're a bad comparison. All right, so that's scenario 1, and I understand it's not very palatable. I would normally never do a big adjustment in the first year to that extent if I could avoid it. But I don't know how we can avoid it.
Well, it's
So-
part of the sin of not going up as we should have since 2018. And so it's just,
Which bleeds into scenario 2. Yes, which I don't know that this is gonna fly, but what I would recommend, if you guys can do it, if it's at all palatable, I would recommend that you guys go ahead and implement those notice rates as soon as you possibly can, like today or tomorrow. Obviously, you're probably gonna have to go to your board and talk to them about it. All you're mandated to do by law is nothing because you've already noticed them. It's already been done. You could go up to these tomorrow. That's probably not a good thing to do. I wouldn't advise it as a rate consultant.
why wouldn't you advise that? At rate?
That could be very bad for your customers. They would sit here and say, oh, you've just increased my rates 34% and you didn't let us know. Well, we did, but it was back in 2018, right? So
We could send out a. letter
That's-
to everybody saying, hey,
that's exactly what I would do.
SDG&E say gas rates are going up 100% this.
Well, that's exactly what I do. Again, you're not required to by law, but I would send out a postcard and say, hey, this is what's happening. And I would recommend doing that. What that would do is it'd only give you, depending on when you can do it, if you could do it effective as soon as possible, that'd give you 4 to 5 months of generating that revenue. And I'm going to show you what that's going to do. Okay. And then I would recommend that you go through the cost of service study and do your rates. And so you're going to have 2 adjustments in a year's period, but at least it's piecemealing it a little bit instead of all at once, that 50%. Okay. So this is that same table, just showing you that the same kind of stuff. So if you implemented those rates today that have already been approved and noticed, then in July, we were looking at closer to an 8% for just meeting the minimum. Again, that's not what I would recommend. I'd go all the way down to the 3rd row where I'm saying, hey, let's do the target. So you do the 34%. Then in July, you would do a 10% followed by 9.5. So it saves you a little bit.
Reiterate, all these with the capital forecast 0 developer.
Yep.
And anytime developer dollars come in, it takes some of the pressure off of that bottom line to bring, because that's an extra revenue source that we're not showing, right?
Are the board members aware of any of this?
Yeah.
Okay,
You're the first line. You get the benefit of this.
Flag out, see how many holes get shot.
So I'm going to show you visually the two options, what it looks like. So again, this is the first scenario where we don't do the previously proposed or noticed rates. This is just starting July 1st. This is where we're going to be at. And again, this is your operating. So the black line is the new revenues. Your expenses are the red dash trend line. And what I'm showing you is that in 2023, if you guys don't cut cost or do something, I'm not going to say magical, but if you don't do something, you're going to be at a deficit of $1.1 million. Okay. Again, this is assuming no capital at all. And now this is your ending reserves under that scenario. So what I want to point out is in fiscal year 2023, you see that little, I don't know how to make it do, but the little red or pink bar, that's showing that you don't even have enough in reserves to cover the operating deficit and what's there. So again, you'd have to have money from somewhere, right?
Well, we end up.
And like I said, I know that's an option, but I don't think the water is in such a strong financial position that you're gonna want to rob from them either. So like I said, you guys are kind of in definitely a balancing game here. The red dotted line, that represents that minimum operating target that I was telling you guys about on those little tables. Okay, so that's like bare minimum. Like if you were below that, then you're at risk of not being able to pay your salaries or your electricity or the treatment costs. So you don't want to be there. So you absolutely need to be above that. We're meeting that in 2026. Like I said, we're not even doing it in year one. We're just getting over that operating deficit. Okay. So then I have that in 2028, which is my 5-year rate period, I'm saying, okay, I want to be at that target. So in year 5, like I said, we're trying to build it up over time. Go ahead.
will we receive a copy of this PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. I think that would be helpful because there's a lot of information that we
Okay.
can look at.
And think about. Not a problem. And then I will always offer this, we can always have sit down workshops. We've done it before where we go through the model and you can see how these things change as you make changes to the assumptions. So that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is not a whole lot different other than, like I said, you're going ahead and implementing the previously proposed and adopted rates. This drops that deficit in operating to 600 as opposed to 1.1 million. And again, you guys starting out with some reserve balances. Remember, it was the 6 something and the 7. Okay. So what this does is now in 2023, you see you're positive. So you're not completely out of reserves. You're starting to rebuild. You reach the minimum in 2025. So that's 1 year earlier, right? These are all the reasons why I would recommend doing it, right? Because you don't go negative on your reserves. You don't have to get money from somewhere or cut costs that we're not sure where you can cut them from. You meet your minimum 1 whole year earlier. We're still only trying to aim for that target line in year 5. And again, I do this because we're assuming no CIP. I want to make sure that we get above that so that then when we do introduce that CIP, hopefully then we don't have really large rate adjustments in the future. I know it's a lot to think about. I know it's not a good story to tell. Recommendations, discussions, I definitely want to open it up to you guys if you have feedback besides just, wanting a copy of the presentation. I know it's tough. I would, from your rate consultant, I would seriously really strongly consider going ahead and implementing those previously adopted rates because it's just going to buy you a little bit more time. It's going to bring it up to where they should have been anyways, right? That's where they should be today.
Right.
It's not that, that's the story because that's where they should be already. And then everything we do from that point forward is, okay, now we're just doing good financial planning.
So you might have noticed the last bullet on this slide.
That's the one I'm rolling my
Yeah.
eyes at. Yeah.
So Andrew's been working with a number of different agencies and, there are a number, like when I worked at Liebenheim, wastewater charges are collected on the tax roll. They do it in the Vista, they do it in
Acadia,
Acadia,
Mhm.
and in other agencies. Some of that I always thought that's a vestige of pre-Prop 13 days. But it turns out there's a segment in the health and safety code, I believe it is, that will allow us to make that transition without an election. That we can just take these charges, give them to the county, they'll collect them in the tax rate. That's something we're looking into. One of the legal specialists that is working as counsel to another agency, just happens to be the Water Authority Special Counsel on Detachment. But I know her, she's a nice lady. I pinged her. She hasn't gotten back to me. But Claire, if any of you guys are Water Authority, tell Claire Collins to give me a call. But and we're also talking to our general counsel about it, but it's an attorney who's already worked through it to get some idea of what the process is. But getting on the tax roll is obviously it's the same amount of money to every person.
Yeah, but the cash flow is so different,
It is.
It is.
right? And I'm wondering, Tracy, does that cash flow work for us?
Yeah.
To get it twice a year rather than every month?
If you have an appropriate reserve.
That's what I was gonna
if
say.
you don't
That's,
have the appropriate, like if we do the first implementation here right away on the bills. And at such point that we start July 1 and move it to the tax roll, then that would likely pan out. Now we have to do the math to make sure that there's going to be cash to work everything through. Some of the big chunks we pay Oceanside come in lump sums. You know, their big capital bill they do, and they send us they give us, you know, it's not like salaries and things like that. It comes in a couple chunks a year. Or they do one monthly and then the capital's annual. I forget how Oceanside bills out on that. But some of those things can be managed, but yeah, if we have the appropriate reserve balance, then you can write out those things because you see what your burn rate is and then when it's going to go up. So that's definitely an option. Sure, it'd be great if we could put water on there as well. We'll have to see if there's any kind of water related wastewater charges that can get on there because the stability of that revenue is good. Now, some people write off their property taxes all with the SALT deductions. It's gotten worse for a lot of people, so it's not as much as it used to be. You can't, it's not a federal tax deductible charge, but you know, people over the years have always written off non-deductible property tax fees, things that are collected by the county. But it's just something to talk about, think about
What's the primary benefit?
for,
Do
you know,
we have-
part of
do
it's.
We have delinquent people.
Well,
Yeah,
we have
delinquencies.
Delinquent people, it's also a public relations option because we can put a part of the water fixed fee on there too. It makes it look like their bill is a lot lower when they get it from us every month, even with just the wastewater off there. You know, we get a lot of stuff on Nextdoor talking about how high their bills are. It just looks different when you have part of it on the property tax.
When they compare us to other agencies who don't have the wastewater charges on their bill, then we compare as people look at the total number, bottom line of the bill, they don't look at individual components. It's the same amount of revenue, it's just being collected in a different way.
We spend a lot of staff time doing collections. If we had wastewater and a good chunk of our water on the property tax bill, I mean, we do 3 cycles a month and 3 different efforts to collect throughout the month with 15-day notices, 7-day, 48-hour shut offs.
We might hear about it from property owners who rent their property.
It's going to be a
When this
transition. for them. There's
transitions over to
definitely
them
be
to
some
pay as opposed to
communication
the
with
renter.
them.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, this is going to take a little bit deeper of thought.
Oh,
So
yeah, for
it's-
sure.
This is a long process, but it's something we wanted to look at.
there's, you know, pros and cons to it. I think it's something that more agencies are moving towards as their fixed costs keep on increasing, you know, and as people's
Mhm.
affordability becomes more and more of a
When you-
concern.
You talk to the staff at Leucadia Wastewater, which is a wastewater only district that gets all their revenue through the tax roll. And we talk about how often their phone rings. It's like never.
They have it
And
pretty
because
easy.
nobody ever sees it, it goes on the property tax bill and there's no monthly bill to pay and there's not a care in the world about
So
it.
we basically, the benefits would be mostly redirecting heat. And secondly, some savings on the collection side, right,
Yeah.
Tracy? Because we wouldn't have to
Right.
go through much gymnastics on it. Yeah.
And then
Or
if you're,
some renter who isn't
But
able to
mainly
pay the
we're-
full bill, their bill went down by $70 a
But
month.
mainly,
Maybe they'll pay the bill.
Yeah,
we're shedding heat. That's,
Shedding heat.
that's
that,
really.
yeah,
what we're doing.
it's
That's-
like,
just
it's
all.
putting it here versus. I do like your idea for possibly the board members and members of this committee to participate in like a workshop to manipulate this data more. So then at the end, there's a team
Mhm.
process to allow the best decision to surface.
like I said, we can pull up the model. It's very easy to
do it
do.
right
It's
now.
very dynamic.
I need to look at this a little bit deeper.
but I think it will just show, right, what happens as you get rid of that 50%. Well, you'll see that impact.
It's a big giant Excel sheet that has
Yeah.
a whole budget,
Yeah.
all those escalation percentages we looked at earlier, all those things factored in. And then it does forecasts that create those graphs. And you can say, all right, we're only going to increase revenues by 30% or 34%. And they go, ooh.
Yeah.
And they say, all right, let's do 34% in, starting February 1 and then another 10% July 1. It improves things significantly. The faster you get it done, the better.
Absolutely.
And I think that the option of implementing the previously noticed rates with a postcard mailer is probably the best one to, like they say, when you're in a hole, you got to stop digging. And when this came to light to me about, I don't know, it was toward the end of last year, they said, hey, we think that the first they look at it, well, it isn't right. They had to go back to the Wayback Machine from before Tracy's time to go back and find out that heck, it never happened. And that was a surprise to me and a disappointment, but it is what it is. And now we got to figure the right path forward. It'd be the same, almost exactly, it'll be exactly what they would be paying today. They've just saved that money.
And it really wasn't like, we didn't really notice it until fiscal year 22 numbers came in at a loss. The years before that, there were, the growth, we really didn't see it.
Right.
Over $1 million increase in
I don't,
net position every year.
I don't think you have an alternative in all honesty.
No, you don't. I think
Right, I
you're
mean,
right.
the
Yeah.
board adopted it.
The
We-
board adopted
Yeah,
it,
the board,
and the
yeah.
moment that we
Yeah.
discovered and verified that this has not happened and that the rate is supposed to be
a good
this,
point.
I would think you
Yeah.
expose yourself in some ungood way
Well, I'm with you.
by not doing it.
Right.
I think you,
Well, I think it's going to be more than, hey, this is the recommendation,
Yeah.
just to let everybody know. And then
right,
we'll prepare a notice to the customers that'll be unpleasant. And then we'll have to go through another hearing process, 218 process for the other rates this spring. And, one of the things that's challenging about being out here for those who are on sewers, we're so far away. I mean, anybody who's
Right.
driven to where the San Luis Rey wastewater facility is, it's down there at the beach. And it's so remote that we have customers on wastewater here that is, the Vista Valley Country Club is all about Little Gopher Canyon Road. And you go on that little road, you think there's a wastewater line in here? What is going on here? And it's more expensive. But when you look at the rates, I pay, I pulled my bill up for City of Escondido. I pay $78 a month for my house, single family home. And so the rates when we're way behind the curve. It should be much cheaper in City of Escondido to provide wastewater, much more dense. The plant is like 1/10 the distance from where my house is to where it's treated. And so the service, considering the factors of where you live in a rural area, is being provided as efficiently as it can be. There's just mechanics of a lot of infrastructure to serve a small number of people
Mhm.
that are unavoidable. And that's kind of where we are. I think you're right that we should move forward with doing what the board told us to do in 2018. And but we didn't want to just unilaterally do that without bringing this forward and then
Appreciate that.
going through the process.
I appreciate that, but that's just, I think.
Yeah.
That's,
So we'll be talking to the board, we'll be informing the board about this month as well.
it makes the rate discussion a little less inflammatory.
Right.
Right.
Because
It's
it's been
go ahead
approved.
and have the flames erupt when the postcards go out and the bills go out, getting us where we are supposed to be. And that's a conversation that's unpleasant but manageable. It makes the rate conversation
Right.
much more doable.
Mhm.
Wow,
Yeah, wow, that's right.
I'm going to,
I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but
You know what?
I'm
If
gonna be
I-
on the
where we're
golf
at,
course
if
on
I
the
can
days you do that.
Let's
Okay.
before the committee leaves, or at least sometime this week, if I could have a printed copy of that. Sure. Thanks.
yep, no problem.
Whoa,
Do you want it? Do you want the electronics that has all those animations or do you want one printed?
one printed.
Okay,
So
No problem.
Version.
It doesn't matter.
Give me a copy.
That way I can write all over it.
Tracy, you want me to clean it up so that the animations aren't there?
Yeah, it
'Cause
doesn't,
it might cover some of the stuff.
Yeah,
If it doesn't matter, then it's,
doesn't. matter.
okay, not a problem. Well, I thank you guys for your time.
One point here.
Yeah.
When you get around to telling the customer,
Yes.
don't tell them that you forgot to
Yeah,
raise the
don't.
rate.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
know,
Tell them that we have done our very best not to have to increase your rates for
Right.
this long, but finally we're gonna have.
Exactly. Let them know that it was approved 2018, but we were hesitant due to some,
We could
Yeah.
blame it on the pandemic.
and then we were ready to implement, and then the pandemic
Supply chain.
happened. But this has become to the point we must implement, and it's been approved by the board.
Yeah, we
Since
can say your rates
2018.
haven't been increased.
Yeah,
in-
yeah, don't say,
well,
Tom,
we-
you
I don't know
forgot.
what it was before
Right,
then when they
right.
increased.
Wow.
We'll have to go back and see.
Can we
when
just
the-
say over 5 years?
Well, we can go back and look exactly when the last rate increase was, because it was more than 5.
Okay.
All right, tell us all about the variable fixed charge. No, just-
Peter Overlay would be your friend.
Do you guys have any other questions for Andrea?
it's like in-
What a day.
Later I will.
Pete, you done?
No,
I'll call.
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Very nice presentation. Yeah. Well, the good news is fortunately, this was discovered now instead of waiting another year or two and then all of a sudden realizing. So it is what it is.
Yeah, bye, drive safe.
Item
I
13.
think it
How's
let
it
up a
going
little
out?
bit.
Yep. Should I proceed to the next item?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Item 13, preliminary review of mid-year budget adjustments.
Okay, so you guys, we just finished the December 31st year-to-date budget versus actual, so those, I'm meeting with departments this next week to look at what adjustments need to be made. We don't have a lot of significant items. Things are looking pretty good with the messaging that we've put out with,
Mm.
cost containment and so next month I'll be bringing you a list of actual adjustments, but I expect it to be very short. So nothing to present today, but just an update.
Great.
Thank you. This is nice to have it now. So thank you.
Oh, the finance pack, yeah. So we'll be basing our adjustments on the finance pack that you guys
Awesome.
have. We actually just finished that this morning, so.
Yeah. Very, very good. Thanks.
Item 14, discussion regarding committee membership appointments and reappointments.
So
I understand what this topic is about, but I am clueless on the specifics. Who's up and who's not? What's the scoop, Dawn?
Well, so this was the opportunity for Bill Stewart to
Yeah.
notify the committee that he was interested in attending, continue to attend as a public member since he's no longer on the board. He didn't show up today, so I'm not sure. I didn't hear from him either when I explained this to him. So I'm not sure. There's nothing to do today if he's not here. There's nobody else that needs to be.
That was gonna be my next
Yes.
question. What about Pete, Julie, and me? Do we have any?
Everybody's good right now for reappointments, so I'll be checking that and I'll be
Alright.
bringing those back when they're.
And when you say good for reappointment, is this good for another month or good for 6 months or good for a year? What's the
Reappoint,
scoop?
so the committee members are reappointed for 4 years. So
Okay.
every 4 years, I'll bring those back if the members are still on the committees. And then the next item is for the committee chairperson, which is.
Right, we'll
due
get
this
to
month.
that. Yep. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there someone who could call Bill Stewart personally, or would you like me to do it? I think his knowledge would be very valuable.
You're more than welcome to reach out to him and see where he's at. I know that he has been appointed to the Communications and Customer Service
Oh.
Committee,
Oh,
which doesn't negate him from participating in both. So I let him know that, but if you want to reach out to him and just see, where he's at. I did not hear a response from him on that, so.
It's a
What do
free
you think?
country. The phones are here. Have
Well,
at it.
if he's on the communications, that's critical because that committee really needs.
Right, but there's nothing saying he can't serve on both, as Flint serves on both, and there's others that, serve on 2 committees. So if he wants
Well,
to, he can. I just don't know.
Do it.
He got my email, he didn't respond to it, so I thought he would be here today when I didn't get a response.
Your call.
I'll think about that one
There you go.
because
I'm-
Bill really needs
Right.
somebody on that committee.
In general, my approach to dealing with volunteer situations like that is I'm not a chaser.
Yeah,
So if they want to serve,
they
we're
serve.
happy to have them.
Yeah.
I hope he serves on this committee. I think his input's really valuable because he's got so much
Yep.
historical information
Yep.
and board
Yep.
perspective.
Right,
I
so, and
personally
if he doesn't want to serve, then we need to hear from him. He officially wants to resign from this committee as
Right.
well. So it goes one way or the other. So if you want, I can talk to him and let him know that the committee did share
Yeah.
the
That'd be
valuable
great.
information he brings
That'd
to
be
the
great.
committee
How
and see
about
what
Don?
he's
Yeah.
doing.
We would definitely appreciate having him back.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yes. we
Okay,
would.
I'll
For that
reach out to
person.
him and
Okay.
express that to him.
All right. Item 15, discussion and possible action to appoint 2023 committee chairperson. I will say, as I always have, that in the spirit of rotation, I am always perfectly willing to pass the chairmanship on to somebody else that wants it. And I think it's a good thing. And so I'll leave it at that. What do you guys want to do?
I want to make a motion that you retain the chairmanship. You have so much
Mhm.
to contribute that you know, and you know so many things. There's no way any of us could replace what you're able to do.
I'll second that.
Hi, that's very kind of you. Thank you, Pete. It's nice of you to say that.
Hey, it's true.
I generally tend to think of myself as a you know what disturber, but thank you. All right, well, so what do we do?
So you need to take a vote
Okay.
and there's only three of you.
Do we have to have a motion and a second?
Well, that was a motion.
That was a
yeah.
motion.
Motion.
And I
you said-
seconded.
Okay.
So it would take a vote and you would probably want to participate in this vote. There's three of you. You'll probably need to participate in this vote since there's three of you, right?
But
Or do you
if there's a
Okay.
quorum, it can be a 2-to-1 vote.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so yeah, so you don't have to. If you
not
want to
yeah.
abstain, you can.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
All right.
If you didn't hear that, Don, that was an eye on Flint's part.
I did hear
It
it.
was really quiet. I wasn't sure if it came through.
Thank you for your confidence and I'm always happy to serve, but I really do mean it when I say that I'm more than willing to pass the leadership on to somebody else. Rotation is a good thing. Okay. 16, review of the monthly board finance packet.
Okay, so you should, before I get yelled at, you should have received it this morning. We were putting some last minute budget or actuals in because San Diego County Water Authority was taking a little bit with their invoices. Nothing has changed really. I did look at the water sales we have up to just fiscal year to date December. So looking projection wise, I'm thinking we're still going to be around 14.5. But obviously the rain
Well, on this.
could change
I
things.
see That red line
Mhm.
is gonna go flat. Go
Yes,
Flat here. We'll see what.
this December was a little bit drier. Obviously, January is starting off pretty wet, so that could change dramatically next month. So ask me then. Other than that, not much to report.
Thank you.
Julie, you have any comments, any questions?
No.
Pete?
No.
I got one. On attachment A. And you know, Tracy knows, sometimes I have trouble. I get things a little weird in my reading of these reports and I have to be schooled a little. On attachment A, I'm looking at the over under column and I'm seeing that for wastewater operating, there is a massive underspending. If I read this, not overspending, it is a negative. This is a negative on a negative. So does that mean they have spent 800,000 more
So
than budgeted?
The over under column takes into account what percentage of the year we're through.
Right?
We haven't received we're under budget for 6 months in because we take all the expenses and figure we should be 50% of our budget should be spent, but we're under that amount because we haven't gotten the City of Oceanside invoice yet. We get it once. a year.
Okay, because I just,
There's
you know,
a
that
big
number
capital
just
bill
really
of
stood out big and
$100,000.
I'm thinking, how could we have underspent unless Robert's not paying his people or
No,
something?
I actually got excited when I saw that. I looked-
The numbers assume everything is distributed evenly monthly.
Okay, so we have these two big expenses and they
The-
cause swings in the
As
way that,
Andrew indicated, the Oceanside costs are 35%.
right, I
total
saw that.
cost,
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they have a big capital bill they send us each year, which we don't know exactly what it is until they send it to us, which is a little frustrating. But that hasn't dropped yet. And so
Okay,
we'll see.
there was something else which may belong in the other committee. Just give me a moment. Rice Canyon. Oh, please help me find Rice Canyon.
Is it on the attachment B, the,
Here we go, Rice Canyon. It is on attachment B. About 7 or 8 projects down. What I'm seeing is that I was under the impression that we are largely done with that project. And what I'm seeing is that we have spent 1.7 million against a budget of 2.9. Do we really have $1.2 million left to spend on that project, or are
You
we
know what?
gonna?
This is only through October 31st for the spend on the projects. I need to update that. Thank you. for-
Oh,
Second component is they average 2 to 3 months lag on setting up their. Even past in the system, they pay and then it has to go all the way back to New York again.
Wow.
They're about 2 to 3 months.
'cause this
Okay.
comes through Tri-Point Homes, not direct.
okay, yeah, I know.
There's a lag time.
Actually, I was kind of hoping the private sector would be a little faster than the public sector, but not in this case.
Public
Not-
sector is not the sole domain of bureaucracy, my friend.
You are correct. Okay. All right. So we're not looking at some potential little surplus of dough there. We're gonna be right up against that 2.9 because
Everything.
Every cent.
it's not the right answer, Chad, but that,
Well, there were change orders on it.
May I
Okay.
take a
Remember there was
detour
80
for just a
grand
minute?
And
all right. Well, those are the things that cross. I do have some comments about some of what I saw there, but it is not finance stuff. It is engineering stuff. So I'll save it.
May I ask a finance? Live Oak Park Road Bridge, is it done?
No.
Okay,
have
that's
you-
all I need to know. Okay, thank you.
Don't you drive on Live Oak Park?
No,
it's a county of
It's
San
very
Diego.
obvious it's not done.
no, well, that's why I wanted to ask, because we keep putting money there. So
Right.
Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I live on the other side of the temporary traffic light, so I know very well that Live Oak Park is not close to being done. But they were working in the rain today. They had a crew out there. They had 2 ladies and 1 guy.
Oh,
I don't know what they were doing. The 2 ladies were walking along the side of the road and there was a guy just standing around staring. I don't know what they were doing. It's a city project, right?
County.
County project. Public Works. Okay, so I think we can spool this up pretty quick. Item 17, list of suggested agenda items for the next scheduled budget and finance committee meeting. So we're gonna have the mid-year budget revisions, right,
Mhm.
Tracy? Okay,
be ready.
got it. And will there be any follow-up to Andrea's visit or huh?
Yeah, we'll go over, we're gonna be talking with the board about it, and,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
we'll,
At our next meeting, we'll be back on
We'll
that
get the
topic.
feedback.
Okay, wastewater rates.
what the discussion was, you know, if the board agrees with, what we think, and you all tend to agree with, that we should just move forward with the
Yeah.
rates that were already approved now, and then that changes the modeling.
Is that something you discussed with the board in executive session or an open session? And so will you be communicating this to them in advance in some way so that they're not kind of
Yeah.
rocked back on their?
I'm sure I'll have discussions. I'm not allowed to violate the Brown Act in any way, but if I have to talk to an
Okay.
individual board member and not in a serial manner,
Okay,
but it's not a, you know, it's gonna be more of an information act, because the board has already taken action,
right.
but I
Yeah.
don't want to have notices go out for a rate increase that they're like, hey, what are we, 5 years
Right,
ago?
right.
And their phones start ringing and they have no idea why. Not a good plan. Agree.
For information.
Okay. Do we have any other topics that are like, there's of course the usual monthly finance report.
No, we'll start pivoting towards the water rates also.
Can we get a preview sneak peek at the new concept on the rates?
By next month? Probably not,
That's a probably not, did you say?
unless I can hire someone.
No,
You know,
hired Andrea.
Okay,
we've
Andrew's busy right now.
noting the excitement.
I'm excited
We have-
too, but
we
we have a
have-
lot to do.
Noting the excitement, I would also say, if we're not ready, we're not ready.
We're not-
It's waited all this time. It can wait an extra month. Control yourself.
I don't know that I can. I'm too excited.
I agree.
Actually,
It's really
I
exciting.
am dying
It
to
is.
see it.
I
I
know.
really am. I'm dying to see it, but all things in good time.
Don't die.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll just live with these three items, and obviously anything else in the finance crew that you guys want to put on the agenda is good, but we have those three: mid-year budget, wastewater rates, and the monthly report.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I stepped out. Did Bill, do you guys recommend for Bill to be appointed with him not being here? That's step one for.
Yeah, we have to know if he's up
I'm-
for it or not. I think there's unanimous view that we would love to have Bill continue with us, but that's,
Rule number one of committee, you gotta show up.
yeah, gotta show up. Okay, is there anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Nothing else? Okay, then item 18 is adjournment. So Q and ED, let's quit and eat dinner, okay?
Woo! Thank you,
QED.
everybody.